is so interesting to me that you yourself, as a white European, find that when people of color talk about race, that you believe is racializing conversations. But when people like you fixate on, well, Barack Obama was a black president, why don't you object to that? That is racializing a conversation about the former president of the United States. But you can't put your,
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we are looking at a Piers Morgan interview that gets tense almost immediately. Joy Reid comes in expecting a real conversation, but before long, the interview turns into a fight over race, media coverage, double standards, and whether Piers was actually interested in hearing her out in the first place. And neither of them is exactly known for backing down. What makes this one interesting is how quickly Joy realizes where the conversation is heading. Instead of letting Piers control the framing, she starts challenging the premise behind his questions and calling out what she sees happening in real time. Keep watching, because some of the strongest exchanges come later when the conversation gets much more personal. And before we jump in, tell me where you are watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments. It is always interesting seeing where everyone is tuning in from. All right, let's get into the interview.
Many people enjoyed your show for many years. A lot of people at NBC were briefing that the reason was declining ratings post the election, a 47% decrease in your election, in ratings from pre-election. But you told Mark Lamont Hill on his show this.
After I said on my show that the reason Americans could relate to Ukrainians in a way that they didn't relate to Palestinians, that Ukrainians are white. And so watching white people get their schools bombed was, hit different. That hit our ratings. I mean, it definitely, we could see the loss of white viewers from that moment that I said that. Right. So they were like, we don't like the name calling. And also I'm a black woman. So, I mean, I'm sure it makes him angrier, when I say things. Maybe because I am a global South person myself, as a black person, we have a different empathy toward other global South people when they are suffering. And so we're going to come at that story from a different angle and in a different way and with different kinds of empathies. And I think that's not always received very well in the news business.
Now, Joy, look, let's be honest. I don't think you were fired after all those years because of your skin color or because you're a black woman. I think you were fired because your show just got increasingly unpopular. It happens all the time in TV. That's why you got let go. Why play the race card?
First of all, I love the fact that your play the race card is your version of the race card. You literally are so fixated on trying to racialize conversations with me, Piers, that I find it actually quite charming.
You racialize more conversations in your tenure at MSNBC than any host in history.
All right, Mark. All right, Piers. And the bottom line is you take an entire conversation that I had with Mark Lamont Hill and pick the bits that you can racialize because this is your shtick. And I get that this is your shtick.
You racialize everything, Joy. Come on.
I get it. I understand this is your shtick, Piers. And listen, game recognizes game. I get this is your game.
It's not my shtick.
And the bottom line,
it was your shtick.
It is your shtick, and everyone knows that it is. It was your shtick. Piers, we understand what it is. And it is so interesting to me that you yourself, as a white European, find that when people of color talk about race, that you believe is racializing conversations. But when people like you fixate on, well, Barack Obama was a black president, why don't you object to that? That is racializing a conversation about the former president of the United States. But you can't put your, and I'm sure you find that charming and funny.
I find it hilarious because you're the one. You're the one who said Donald Trump.
You and your friend Donald Trump.
You said Donald Trump is a white fascist.
He is well. I agree with Mark
when Obama did the same thing,
last time I checked, is
I'm not allowed to mention his skin color.
I agree with his former chief of staff, who last I checked was not black and said he's fascist. And Mark Milley said he's fascist to the core. Okay. So I happen to agree, and I know this is what it's important to you, with two very white gentlemen about Donald Trump's fascist tendencies.
Okay.
If that makes you sad and uncomfortable, I can't help you.
This is where the conversation really starts turning. Joy explains why she believes some of her coverage connected differently with certain audiences, and Piers immediately shifts the discussion toward race. He asks why she is playing the race card, but Joy catches the contradiction straight away. Her point is simple. She was answering his question about empathy and perspective. Piers was the one who introduced the accusation that she was making everything about race. So Joy throws it right back at him. She basically says that his definition of her playing the race card begins with him bringing up the race card himself. That response completely changes the dynamic because now the argument is no longer just about what Joy said. It becomes about how Piers framed the question. Then Joy pushes the point further. She tells Piers that, as a white European man, he seems to define people of color discussing race as somehow racializing a conversation. And that raises an obvious question. Who gets to decide when race is relevant enough to talk about? The exchange gets even sharper when Piers challenges Joy over describing the former president as a fascist. Joy responds by pointing to something much harder to dismiss. She reminds him that the former president's own former chief of staff, who she specifically notes is not black, used the same description. She also points out that a top general expressed the same view. That matters because it directly challenges the idea that Joy's position comes from some uniquely racial interpretation. She is pointing to people who worked closely with the former president himself. And suddenly, the argument becomes a lot harder to reduce to Joy Reid simply making everything about race.
Oh, yes, that made me sad and uncomfortable. I think it makes you a little bit of a hypocrite, but that's different. Now, President Trump reacted to your departure by saying, low-life chairman of Comcast, Brian Roberts, the owner of ratings-challenged NBC and MSNBC, has finally gotten the nerve up to fire one of the least talented people in television, the mentally obnoxious racist Joy Reid, based on her ratings, which were virtually non-existent, should have been canned long ago, along with everyone else who works there. What's your response to that?
It's fascinating to me that you think it's important that I care what Donald Trump says about me. It's a badge of honor. If he dislikes me, then I think I'm doing something right. I have zero respect for Donald Trump, and therefore, if he feels the same way about me, then the feelings are quite mutual, and I'm very, very proud of that and happy with it.
Okay, I want to play a clip. This is you talking about, you attacking parents. You spoke out about their concerns about gay and paedophilia pornography books being placed in school libraries.
The question I'm asking is, what is the expertise that you have and other Moms for Liberty advocates have to decide that a book, an award-winning book like All Boys Aren't Blue, isn't appropriate for students to read? What is your expertise?
What a tragic story of a young man who's anally raped by his adult family member. So you have incest, rape, pedophilia. Joy, you said you'd let me answer, so I'm going to answer for you.
Please do.
In what context is a strap-on dildo acceptable for public school? That's my question to you. Tell me what the context around the strap-on dildo or the rape of a minor child by a teacher.
Hold on a second.
No, we're talking about public school.
One moment.
All right.
Now, there's also a second clip. This is you talking about Republicans exploiting concerns by minors who identify as transgender. And you said this was an old-age tradition which Nazi Germany did. Let's take a look.
In fact, there are more kids who have been exposed to gun violence, estimated at 3 million, than there are transgender Americans of all ages in total. Targeting trans people isn't new. It is an age-old tradition, which Nazi Germany did with brutally violent ends in the 1930s.
Then Piers reads out a pretty vicious attack aimed directly at Joy. And instead of getting defensive, Joy seems almost pleased by it. She calls it a badge of honor. Her attitude is basically this. If someone she considers cruel strongly dislikes her, she is not going to lose sleep over earning his disapproval. Joy says the feeling is mutual, and she is proud of that. But the bigger point comes right after. Joy brings up gun violence and says that roughly 3 million children have been exposed to it. She then compares that number with the entire transgender population in the United States across all age groups, arguing that the number of children affected by gun violence is larger. That comparison gets directly at the political argument she is making. Joy believes an enormous amount of attention is being focused on a comparatively small transgender population, while a much larger issue affecting children receives nowhere near the same political energy. And whether you agree with her framing or not, you can see exactly what argument she is building. She believes transgender people are being turned into a convenient political target. That is also why Joy connects the conversation to a much older political pattern. Throughout history, political movements have repeatedly focused public fear on smaller minority groups, presented those groups as a wider social threat, and then used that fear to build support. That is the historical parallel Joy is reaching for here. She is not treating the rhetoric as an isolated political disagreement. She sees it as part of a pattern that has appeared before, and that explains why she responds so strongly to the entire discussion.
Now, the confusing part of all this, Joy, is what you really think about the LGBTQ plus, whatever it now is, community, right? Because as you know, when you started commentating about this, appearing to be a big ally, a lot of stuff emerged which came from posts that you had purportedly put up in a blog between 2007 and 2009, one of which said, most straight people cringe at the sight of two men kissing. Another said, I don't want to watch the two male characters in Brokeback Mountain. You were talking about having sex. Does that make me homophobic? Probably. You referred to the then Florida governor as Miss Charlie and featured the tag gay politicians. Now, you said at the time when all this emerged, I genuinely don't believe I wrote those hateful things because they're completely alien to me. I hired cybersecurity experts to see if somebody manipulated my words on my former blog. And the reality is they've not been able to prove it. Now you're not at MSNBC. Now you're on your own, doing your own thing, and you don't have to worry about repercussions and stuff. Are you prepared to finally come clean and just admit that was your blog and you did say those things?
You know, Piers, I might have known that you would use this opportunity and interview and that this was your purpose, right? This is your purpose. And that's fine. This is your show and you can do whatever you like. You know, I could sit here and go on and fight with you about your strange, weird obsession with Meghan Markle, but I won't do that because that would be rude. But what I will say is,
if you want to.
We can do that as well.
Sure.
But the point being that I was very open with my employer at the time about what happened with that old site, which I stopped writing in, before I even came back into the NBC family.
And this is the moment where Joy seems convinced she has figured out why Piers invited her on. Piers suddenly brings up an old blog controversy from nearly 2 decades earlier. Joy immediately tells him she suspected this might have been the real reason behind the interview. You can feel the tone change right there. From Joy's perspective, this is no longer just a broad conversation about politics or media. She now believes Piers has been building toward this confrontation the entire time. But instead of retreating, Joy turns the scrutiny back on him. She brings up Piers Morgan's long-running public fixation on a certain duchess and uses it to challenge the idea that she is the only person at the table who should be answering questions about old controversies or personal obsessions. And she does it smiling. That is important because Joy refuses to adopt the posture Piers appears to be asking for. She does not suddenly become apologetic or start acting embarrassed simply because the interview has moved on to uncomfortable territory. She also points out that she had already discussed the old website with her employer before the controversy resurfaced publicly. So from Joy's perspective, Piers is not uncovering some hidden confession. He is revisiting something she says had already been addressed years earlier. That becomes the bigger battle happening underneath the interview. Piers keeps trying to establish the terms of the questioning, while Joy keeps challenging those terms instead of simply accepting them. And whatever side of the argument you land on, that is what makes the interview so watchable. Joy understands where the questioning is going, calls it out directly, and refuses to become the apologetic guest Piers appears to be pushing her toward. So what did you make of the interview? Do you think Joy handled Piers well, or do you think Piers had a fair point? Leave your thoughts down below, and if you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.